And he said, that's Satan trying to get to you. He's trying to stop you from praying. He's trying to tempt you. And I'm like, well, then he won, I guess, because I don't want to. So, Satan won. And at that point, I just was like, I don't want to go to church. I didn't want to go to church. I didn't want to be part of it. I didn't want to pray. I didn't want to do anything that had anything to do with God.
Hey everyone! As we head into the Christmas season, I just wanted to say thank you for all the love and support that you've shown my little brand, Memoir. I created Memoir because I wanted to have a physical reminder to always remember the Savior, and I wanted to help people to have something that they can hold close to always remember Him. And it's been so cool to see these pieces out in the world and see how much they mean to all of you and how you love Memoir as much as I do. And if you have supported, I can't thank you enough. There's something for everybody. We have men's jewelry and women's, and also kids coming soon. We are going to be doing some of our biggest sales of the year coming up. So if you've had your eye on something meaningful for yourself or somebody you love, now is the time to check out our website, www.memoirjewelry.com. And again, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for all of your support, for anybody that listens to the podcast, for anybody that has supported. I am so grateful for you. And I wanted to wish you a very Merry Christmas. Well, Julie, I am so excited to have you on the podcast. I like going into interviews where I don't have a lot of like background because we have a new system where the team kind of reads through the stories, and it's fun because I get to go into it not really knowing the backstory, and so I get to hear it for the first time with the listeners too. And so it's just really it's really fun. So I'm excited to have you on.
Great. I'm so excited to be here too.
Where you live, like tell us a little bit of background about you so we have some context as we're jumping in here.
Yeah, sure. So I live in North Carolina and kind of in the Winston-Salem area. And I'm from Seattle originally. And I'm a teacher. I teach high school, teach economics and personal finance. And we
Awesome.
have 6 kids. And my husband's like vice president of some company. I don't know. So that's
Awesome.
kind of our background.
I love it.
Um,
It's so
so
cool.
I kind of have a comeback story where I kind of left twice. And so I'll tell about the first one and then I'll add in the second one. So to start, um, my I gotta give you the background of the church with us and our family. So my grandmothers on both sides, they are the ones that joined the church when they first were contacted by the missionaries. And then so my parents joined as children. And so they were new members and they my parents had really like traumatic childhood situations and so they they grew up. My mom grew up in Montana. My dad grew up like in the Seattle region, and they met in the military, and they got married down in Mississippi. So when they started raising us back in the Washington State area, they kind of brought their trauma with them, from their childhood, and used that in the way that they parented and things like that. So, and I want to be like kind about it, but like my parents were heavy-handed, in their discipline. And this is important to why I left the church the first time. So my my mom especially and I had a hard time getting along much of our childhood, and I kind of related it to the church in some ways. So, for example, when I was a little kid, she thought that I said the Lord's name in vain, right? And so she grabbed me by my hand. We were outside. She pulled me up the front steps, yanked me into the house, and brought me to the bathroom and shoved a bar of soap in my mouth to wash
Oh.
my mouth out with soap because I had said a bad word. But I hadn't actually said it. I said something else and she misheard me. But I remember like crying and like telling her, I didn't say that. But it's just an example of like how like the church and her and like religion were complicated for me to start with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so growing up, um, she and like a lot of parents back then were heavy-handed, right? It was in the 80s, like I was
Mm-hmm.
growing up. And it was kind of common for people to like spank their kids and to yell at them and to do things like that. That was like a fairly common practice. And my parents had that happen to them. So they just did what they knew and they were doing the best they could. And I remember like in middle school, I think I was like out on the porch at night because they locked me out because I had been sassy or something. And I remember like taking a walk, and we lived in this like farm it's 10-acre farm out in the middle of the boonies, kind of near Mount Rainier. And so I was just taking a walk, and I just was so angry, and I just kept thinking, if I just died, they they would be sorry. And so that's kind of where I was coming from. And then going into high school, um, I had this teacher who was a Baptist, and he was trying to like save me, like he gave me a pamphlet on how to be saved by Jesus and like to say a little prayer to Jesus and be saved. And he was talking to me at lunch about like his religion and how mine wasn't true and like trying to tell me about how to switch over, and things like that. So he's kind of like doing that. And then it gave me all these questions. And I started like, looking through a concordance, which is like a book that has like the original text of the Bible, and then it has like translations and stuff. It kind of helps you figure out what the real words were and what they mean. And I was trying to use that as a way to find how our church wasn't true, right? And I was using the help of this teacher and just kind of going off the rails with like my testimony. And it was not helping that my mom was super controlling and trying to force me to go to church, right? And like she made me go to everything and do the seminary and do all the stuff. And there was a lot of like conflict between her and I, and like she frequently yelled at me. And I just had a lot of resentment because I had this idea in my mind that, if the church is true, why why am I in this situation? So when I graduated from high school, I went to the University of Washington for college. And as soon as I left school, like I think I went to like maybe once or twice at the Institute building for church and our ward that was at the college there. And then I was just like, I'm done with this. I'm going to figure it out for myself. So I went and I started looking for which church was true. And I started visiting like different types of churches. I went to like Catholic church. I went to, um, Baptist, Lutheran, a bunch of different ones, non-denominational. And I went and started being a pianist at a Lutheran church that was up the street from where I lived. And they were like paying me on Sundays to play the piano for them. And it was kind of actually a nice gig. They were paying a lot. Um, but I always felt like there was something empty. I felt empty when I was there, when I was with those different churches. And I know that some people find like joy in different ones, even like just visiting. So I don't want to like put them down or anything, but that's just how I felt when I was there. Like I just felt like something wasn't enough. Like it wasn't enough. And so I remember one day in my dorm room, I was just by myself and I decided I needed to know for sure, like, which church was true. And so I knelt down and I prayed. And I remember like the questions was asking was like, are you real? Are you there? Do you love me? And stuff like that. And I just had this overwhelming like spiritual experience where the spirit just kind of like wrapped me in the arms of, my savior, and just helps me to feel comfort and love. And I just felt such a strong like embrace, so strong, like I remember it even to this day. Like I can't forget like that happened. And so I started going back to church after that. And at first it was like I was really excited about it, because I just had this like new experience, and I was like spiritual, and I felt like close to the Savior, and I was super excited. And so I ended up eventually getting my endowments and going to the temple to do that. And then shortly after that, I met my husband, and he also had just come back to the church like a year before I met him. And he had just gotten his endowment too. So like when we first met, it was like we had that thing in common, and we were talking about that, and that's kind of like our connection. And we were both really excited about the church. Um, but the problem was he had three little boys, like he was divorced. And so I was like, well, I'll just go on one date, like just one time. And then I won't go out with him anymore because I don't want to be a step parent. And obviously that didn't work out, but like, because I am their step parent and I did get married to him. So we went on obviously more than one date. But when we got married in 2002. I basically became like the mom to three stepsons, like immediately. And they were ages 4, 6, and 9. And that was its own challenge. It was really hard, like to be a stepmom. I didn't really know what I was doing. We had full custody of them. And, like we had lots of trials and things about, how to manage that. And then I had my own three kids as well. And I was like trying to raise them differently than how I was raised, like no spanking and yelling and stuff like that. But, every parent does like the best they can do, like with what they know. And so I've tried to like not, I did a lot of counseling and stuff to kind of get over the stuff the mistakes my parents made, but I'm trying like I'm trying not to throw them under the bus, because
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
the struggles were like part of my experience for like my testimony issues, but now like I have a good relationship with my parents, so things are okay. Um, but my three kids, we raised them in the gospel and everything with the boys, and then so I had two girls and a boy, so altogether we had two girls, four boys. And then we lived in this small town called Carnation, Washington, and we went to this ward. It's such a nice ward, such nice people. I love that ward. Um, but there was some ladies in the ward that they had testimony issues, and they would go for walks, and they would talk during their walks about things that they didn't understand or know or think were true about the church. And they started to kind of get this. It was like this group of like mild dissenters, they were starting to kind of leave the church in their own little ways. And I remember one of the ladies said one day, and I was listening in, and she was saying how, you know, and she was one of that group. She's like, there's a lot of things that I don't believe, but I think I would still raise my kids in this church because it's probably the best place to raise a kid. Like you would have like a good foundation for like a quality human being, right? Like if you raise your kid in the church. And so I kind of like clung on to that because I felt like, that resonated with me, and I wanted to kind of do the same thing, like raise my kids in a good place, in a good church, and have them have good foundation and morals. Um, but then one day we had this like fifth Sunday meeting where this person came in to talk to our ward about testimony problems. Um, and I think it kind of backfired for me because I think they were trying to help us, but it actually made it worse for me. But what happened was he was talking about cognitive dissonance and how people kind of like feel this disconnect between their belief system and what they find out about the church. right? Like some of the history things or stuff that happened that they don't understand or that make them question their testimony. And during that meeting, he said that Joseph Smith used these seer stones and looked in a hat. And I was like, what? I had never heard that before, because I remember in primary, you see the picture of him with these little glasses that he looks through the Urim and Thummim, and you just, that's how you're taught. And so you think like, he looked through those and that's how it was done. And he looked at the pages and somehow he translated it. And so I had no idea. Like this was new information. And I remember being like just blown away by it and like even felt dizzy. Like, what am I doing? I'm in this place where there's this like whole different story going on that I don't even know about. Like, and I had all these questions. And then I remembered what that woman had said about raising her kids in the church. And I was like, well, I think I'll just keep going and I'll just put this question on the shelf because I want to raise my kids in the gospel. So that's kind of what I did. I just kind of put it on the shelf and like left it there. And I was like, I'll get back to it when it's time. So I had these questions and these issues in the back of my mind, but I tried to just like carry on. And so then in our family, we went through this really rough time, like starting in 2008, and we started having these really tough trials in our family life. And I remember going to the temple, and I was also having some health problems at the time. So I went to the temple and I was praying about it. And I was sitting there, and there's this man who he comes to the temple, or at least the Seattle temple a lot. He's in a wheelchair, and I think he probably had ALS or something like that, where he originally probably wasn't as crippled, and then he got to the point where he could hardly move and only could operate like the little handle on his electric wheelchair. And so he went there to the temple like almost every single day. Like that's all he pretty much did was go to the temple. And so every time I went, I would see him. And that day we were in the celestial room and he was in his wheelchair there in the celestial room and his wife was standing next to him. And as I was praying, I opened my eyes and I looked across the room and saw him. And this vision opened up like in my view where he just like stood up out of his wheelchair and became whole. And he looked like this healthy person. And when I saw that, I had this voice said to me, he heals all of us. And then everything went back to normal. Like he was in his wheelchair again. And that experience like really solidified my testimony of Jesus Christ and his ability to help us through hard things. And so, sorry, I don't mean to be emotional, but
Oh, you're good.
so anyway, we eventually moved out to North Carolina, and I was a tax accountant before that, and then we moved out here, and I was trying to switch careers. I didn't know what to do. I was kind of thinking about it, and because I didn't like being a tax accountant, it's super boring. But so about a year and a half after we got out here, so my in-laws live up the street from us, and their daughter, who is 13 at the time, she died suddenly from a brain aneurysm.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and my daughter was like best friends with her, and of course their family was destroyed, and just so much grief, and my daughter was struggling, and all these things were happening. And I went to a conference one day, a state conference, and the speaker was talking about how paintings, you can see stuff in the background and in the front, and that's called perspective, and the things up close are the most important. And so I kind of had this feeling like I needed to do some kind of a career that would allow me to be more part of my family's life and be there for my kids. And so I switched careers to become a teacher. So that's when I became a high school teacher. So I was going through the schooling for that. I was getting a master's. And during that time, it was like COVID happened, right? And my husband was traveling a lot for work, and I was really like frustrated because he was never home. So I'm like raising the kids. He's always gone. I'm trying to go through school, and I was praying that he could get a job where he wouldn't have to travel. But I got this answer to my prayer that said, "Okay, but first, some really hard things are going to happen first, right?" And I was like, "Oh, dang it! I don't want to pray then. I don't want to pray for that. I don't want to ask for that." And that was before COVID. So I thought, okay, it's got to be COVID. Like, that's got to be the thing. That was the hard thing, right? Before he gets the better job. Because he ended up getting a better job. And I was like, okay, that's got to be it. There's nothing else hard, right? Because I didn't want anything else. And the scary part is that my husband's patriarchal blessing said that he would know sorrow
Mm.
in his life. And so, sorry. And so I was like, okay, I hope that's not something else. Like, he's already gone through a divorce. Maybe that was it. He's had a tough life. Maybe that was it. I was hoping it wasn't anything else. Um, but anyway, in the meantime, like, we went on this trip with the youth in the summer of 2021 to the Sacred Grove. And we were like chaperones. And so he and I went and with our son, and our son was a teenager at the time, like our son Logan. He's WYU now, but we were there, and as we were walking through the Sacred Grove, I got separated from the group. And I had always struggled with my testimony of Justice Smith, right? Like, I never, even through all that time with like that temple experience and everything, I still just I didn't know like if it was true about Joseph Smith. Like that was the hardest thing for me. And so we were at the Sacred Grove, and I got separated, and I was walking, and I remember like there was lots of noise in the background, like cicadas and birds and wind and cars in the distance and stuff, noise that you could hear what was going on and around you. But then I got to this one spot, and it's like I went into this like sound bubble or something because there was no sound. It became so silent. And then I was like, just like blown away by how could that happen? Like how could it just get all silent all of a sudden? All these noises just went away, like completely silent, like the temple. And then as soon as I walked out of that spot, all the sound returned again. And I was like, wow, that was like crazy. So I had this like feeling like, well, that's got to mean something, like that's got to mean that's a sacred place. And so that kind of helped me a little bit with that part of my testimony. And then we came back, but that's when things got bad. So on the morning of November 6th, 2022, a cop came to our door, and my husband went down to the door to answer it. And so like at this point, the three boys were all grown up, right? Like they'd all gone through school. His three sons that I parented and raised, they're all grown up. And the youngest of the three, Blake, he had gone to the Marines and come back, and he was living in North Dakota. And then my daughter was up at college at App State, and which was just a couple hours away. And so like we only had the two kids at home at that point. And so with the cop coming to the door, it could have been anything, could have been anybody, right? Like anything happened. And my husband went to the door, he opened the door and talked to the cop. And then he came in and he was sobbing. And he threw himself down on the bed, sobbing. And I asked him what happened, and he said that Blake had died. And I didn't believe it. I was like, what? How? Like I just didn't believe it. And he said that he committed suicide. And so I was like in denial at first. I was just like, there's no way. Like how? Like we had just seen him like not that long before for our daughter's high school graduation. And And he seemed fine. Like everything seemed fine. He complained about a few headaches, nothing else. But like, he was like going to college. He was, living in North Dakota with his girlfriend, and like they were getting along, it seemed, and like things were going okay. And so it just didn't make any sense. And we had to explain it to our two youngest because they're really close with Blake. Like they were like best buds with him, you know. And like when I had been raising him as a younger kid, like he used to carry around my youngest on his shoulders, and like just their best bud, you know. And so I went into my other son's room, Logan. He was 15 at the time. And I woke him up. We told him. He just started crying. Good. Sorry. And he sat up and he had like tears streaming down his face. And then we had to tell Lily, our youngest, she's the one that he carried around on his shoulders. And she had such a hard time. And um, just like a side note, if anybody that's listening to this is thinking about suicide, I just get help because it just destroys families. It just destroys families. I'm so sorry. I don't mean to be so emotional.
Oh, it's okay.
All right. So anyway, the bishop came over and the Relief Society president, and they gave blessings to the kids and to Lee, my husband. And we had to call our daughter Aria from college to tell her to drive home so we could tell her about it. But the whole time I was just like in such denial. And so I said, I don't even want a blessing. I wouldn't face it. Like I couldn't face it. And she came home from college and we told her, and it just destroyed her too. And everybody was just a mess. And it was so hard. And finally, when I started to face reality and like not be in denial, I was just super angry. I was so angry that God would let this happen, you know? And I think the hardest part was watching everybody around me fall apart. So like of course I loved Blake and I raised him since he was 4. He's like my son. But I also was like, I couldn't even grieve because I was dealing with everybody else was falling apart. You know, like my kids were falling apart. My husband was falling apart. Everybody had to go on antidepressants. And I started having like anxiety about like, what if one of my kids died again, like another kid, you know? And I remember like when my niece died from her aneurysm, I remember thinking like, oh man, what if something like that happened to my kids? And my sister-in-law was like, that would never happen. Like 2 kids in the same family dying, that just would never happen. And then so when Blake died, I was like, what's going on? Like I thought this couldn't happen, you know? Like I thought this wouldn't happen twice in one family. And so I was just so angry with God. Like I just uh, I couldn't accept that he would allow it to happen. Like, cause I feel like he could have stopped it, you know? And, we took the kids to counseling and, we tried to deal with it the best we could. And we went to the funeral. We had the funeral in Seattle so that his brothers could be able to visit his grave and everything. And they did a military funeral, and when I finally saw him in the casket, that's when I knew it was real, and I wasn't in denial anymore, and it was so traumatic. And um, my daughter, who's college age, she couldn't even look at the casket. She couldn't do it. She had to stay outside the room because it's it's too much for her to handle. She just fell on the ground crying. And when we got back to North Carolina, I remember saying to my husband, I don't even feel like praying. Like, I don't want to pray anymore. And he said, that's Satan trying to get to you. He's trying to stop you from praying. He's trying to tempt you. And I'm like, well, then he won, I guess, because I don't want to. So um, I remember saying that time, I'm just like, Satan won. And at that point, I just was like, I don't want to go to church. I didn't want to go to church. I didn't want to be part of it. I didn't want to pray. I didn't want to do anything that had anything to do with God. But I also didn't want to like make it hard for my kids because they were still going. So it's like I did sort of a falling away inside. Like I was going with them, but I wasn't really there. And I like would make excuses up like if I could, like, oh, I'm not feeling well today, I'm not gonna go, things like that. So for a while I just was like off and on. And um I just I didn't feel it, and I didn't want to be there, and I didn't want anything to do with God. And so I guess that's my second falling away really is that. And at that same time I was like, well, all those things that I put on the shelf for like my testimony issues, like the things that I questioned before, like the surf stone or whatever, like it was still there on that shelf. And now I was like, well, it kind of makes sense anyways. I don't want to go. I don't want anything to do with this. And now I've got this other stuff that's there, and it's kind of hitting me. So at the same time as all this was going on with me, my son Logan, who like I said, he was 15 when his brother died, but he started facing his own like spiritual issues, like he was trying to decide, what do I believe? Like, do I believe in God? Do I want to be at church? Do I want to go? And so he was trying to decide if he was going to turn away from God or turn to God, during losing his brother. And he's kind of my example in life because he's so awesome. But he decided to turn to God, and he kind of threw himself into the gospel, and he really focused on doing everything he could to be close to God. So he started reading everything he could read about the gospel, about like the scriptures, about God, about our church, everything. And he got really into it. And sorry. And he basically started just immersing himself in the gospel and in everything he could find that he could read to really bring the gospel into his life. And one day he suggested to me, he said, what if you just start listening to conference talks? Because he knew I was struggling with the gospel. And I was like, I guess I could do that, Like, he said it made him feel closer to the Spirit and it helped him. So I was like, I guess I could do that. I could try that. And this was like, I want to say it was like a year and a half after Blake died. And it was hard at first because I would drive to work and I would listen to the news because I teach economics. So it was kind of important to like know what was going on in the world and everything. And so I would replace that with the conference talks. And at first I was like, oh, I don't want to. It's so much work, like it's so annoying. I don't want to sit here and listen to a conference talk. And so it was like this huge effort that I was having to force myself to do. And then eventually I finally like did it. I started listening to him every day, like on the way to work and on the way home. And then I started listening to him when I was running on the treadmill. And then I was listening to him when I was just sitting in my classroom grading papers when no students were in there, on my earbuds. And pretty soon I was just like listening to conference talks all the time. And then my son, Logan, also said, "Hey, I found this podcast." And it was your podcast. And so he's like, listen to the stories of these people who are coming back to the gospel. And so I started listening to those, and it was incredible. It changed my life. So it helped me to feel like other people had been through this. And, none of their stories were like exactly like mine, but they were like such great spiritual experiences. And they really helped build my testimony that God can be there for you when you're having a hard time. And so uh, so basically, after a while, as I was listening to all these conference talks and to your podcast, one day I just realized I was like, oh, I don't feel quite as sad, like I feel like a little bit of like peace coming into my life. And I didn't I didn't understand. I was like, what's going on? This is crazy. Like I'm starting to feel like things are getting better. And as time went by, I got more and more like that. And I realized that the spirit was like helping me through what I was going through. And so just having all those things in my life, like the conference talks and your podcast and all that, was helping me to get the spirit back in my life. And that's what I needed to be able to get the help I needed to get through this. And then I was like thinking to myself, well, maybe I should just sort out those things that I put on the shelf that I don't understand about the gospel and get that sorted out and figure it out. So I started listening to this. I think you've had them on your show, like the Church History Matters.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Casey.
I started, yeah, Casey and them. And they're so great because I love how they talked about all the issues that were hard, like polygamy and things that, like the sticker stone and all that, right? Like, and it made it easier because, like, I got the full story. Like, I wasn't just getting this little snippet of, like, some random bit of information that was confusing or weird or maybe me question my testimony or anything, but they were given the whole context. And so that really helped. And I got all my questions answered. And then one day I was like struggling a little bit with one of the questions. Like, they had been talking on one of their episodes about the other LDS churches that weren't really, like they were shoot offs from like our church, like apostate churches or whatever. I don't know what you call them, but they were talking about how there's truth in every church. Like everybody has a little bit of truth in their church, and they could all get spiritual impressions and things like that. And then I began to question. I'm like, well, then why does it matter what church you are in? Like why does it matter if I go to this one or anyone? Because if they all have some truth and they're all got the spirit and they're all being helped by God and like they're all, like they all got good stuff. And then I listened to one of the episodes that you had about this guy who was in a polygamous church, and he had this dream about the prophet at the time when he had the dream, and then his prophet, which was in his polygamous church, and how like our prophet was like, I don't know if you remember this, interview that you did, but like our prophet had this like whiteness about him, like this purity, and he was and then how he was the one, like he was the right one. And I remember listening to that episode and going, "Oh, okay, I get it." And so that helped me to get back on track with that. Um, and then basically from there, I just started like really immersing myself into the gospel. And like I would study the Come Follow Me lessons, I click on all the links, I'd read all the stuff. And I just really started building my testimony to the point where I was able to start receiving like personal revelation in my prayers again and getting answers and being close to God again. And then that's when everything changed. Like once I was able to have God in my life again, just I felt so much closer to him and to the gospel and just being able to get answers. And then it's like I started to realize and looking back um, that he had been there all along. So, for example, there were so many miracles that happened when we were going through the trauma from our son dying. Um, an example was there was another couple in our ward who had lost a son. Their son that died was named Logan, and he died at like I think 18 or 19, somewhere in there. So they came and they talked to us and they kind of comforted us and helped us. And another thing that was another miracle that happened for us during that time is we were able to get the whole funeral paid for through a GoFundMe account. Like someone set it up and got all the money for it to help us with the funeral. And so that was like really kind. And the people around us were really supportive and kind to us in our ward. The people at my ward were really nice too. They donated money towards it. People at the church did. And like everybody was really supportive. And that was like a really huge blessing for us. There was this one guy at work though that like kept saying every time he saw me in the hall or in the teacher's lounge, he'd always say, "I just can't even imagine." And I was like, so if anybody knows someone who just lost a child, don't say, "I can't even imagine." Like, of course you can imagine it's horrible. So yeah. But other than that, like everybody was super nice to us and that was a really big blessing. And another thing is I got called to a calling at that time in primary, which it was such an easy calling because they were like 10 and 11. Like they didn't have any problems like behaving or anything, not like the little kids, but basically just sat there, with them. And so it was easy calling, but the thing that was special about it is like we would be in the primary room and they would sing these songs like Gethsemane and things like that. And I remember feeling the spirit so strong and it really helped comfort me. And then another special experience that we had where we knew that Heavenly Father was like taking care of us during this time is that my mom, when she went to the temple one day, she said that she felt our son's presence sitting next to her in the celestial room. And he told her that he was okay. And that was huge for us. Because there's so many people in the church that like to say that people that commit suicide go to hell. And that's just not true. I wish people wouldn't say that too, because it's not right. And, like the general authorities have told us that that's not true, like, because people who commit suicide are dealing with mental illness. So they die from their illness.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had some people say that, to me online and things like that. And it's not good to have someone say to someone who lost their child that they're going to hell because they committed suicide, and that it's murder. It's not. It's an illness. It's an
Yeah.
illness.
Yep.
Um, another another spiritual experience I had is I was sitting in my car on the way home from work one day, and I was I was playing music, and I had this prompting that I should turn the music off, and I turned the music off, and I had a feeling that Blake was sitting next to me in the car, and I had this thought coming down my head of him saying, "I'm sorry." And so that also helped a lot. The Lord was just watching over us and taking care of us and helping us through this the whole time, and we didn't even realize until we look back. And so after all this happened, and after I kind of came back to the church and had a strong testimony again, I started this group on Facebook called LDS Spiritual Experiences, Miracles, Tender Mercies, and Conversion Stories. And I started it because I wanted there to be a place for people to share their spiritual experiences that they had. And so it's kind of grown. It's got like over 1,000 people in it now. And people just share on their spiritual experiences. And then that way they can support each other's testimonies. And it's a way to help strengthen our testimonies by seeing that the Lord, his hand is in other people's lives as they're going through things, you know? And so that's been a good thing because it's like kind of like your podcast in a way, because it's not all like comeback stories, but it's like people going through rough things and then they like post like special things that happened that they saw the hand of the Lord in their life that day or in that situation. And it's been really good to see that.
I love that
But
so much.
yeah. But I guess I would just say kind of in the end, well, I guess it's okay to just build your testimony piece by piece, right? Like that's kind of how I felt my testimony has been built over the years. Like I didn't have a testimony of Joseph Smith up front. I had to build that, you know, each little thing I built like step by step. And then I also know that like it's easy for me from my past experience to fall away. So I have to always keep myself immersed in the spirit. And so now I'm like committed to just always doing my scripture study, prayer, listening to conference talks every day. And I don't even want to stop because I'm afraid, you know, like if I stop, then I'll get back off track or something. And I don't want to. So I'm really making sure that I stick with it.
What advice would you give to somebody who has lost a child or has had like a significant amount of grief hit them? Like, what advice would you give to them?
I would say it's really important to stay actively reading the scriptures and praying and listening to conference talks, at least from my perspective. Like that is what helped me through because those things bring the spirit into your life, and the spirit is what comforts you and helps you through it. Because I realized that I couldn't do it on my own. Like I couldn't get through that on my own. And I mean, we're still dealing with it, right? Like we still struggle with the grief. It's been 3 years since he died, and it's still hard. Like I still cry when I talk about it. And sometimes I have anxiety about like, you know, what if something happened to one of my kids, you know, and again. So, I mean, obviously I still need to go through a lot of therapy, but um, the thing that has made it so that we could make it through is the Lord supporting us and helping us. And after I let him back in my life, after I let God be a part of my life, he made it easier for me to carry this burden. And I was able to go off antidepressants, and I was happier again than I was before, you know, and it just helps me to know that I couldn't do it on my own. Like, I don't think we can do these things on our own because it's too hard.
Hmm.
Life is too hard on our own. So we need Heavenly Father's influence in our life and supporting us. So
I love that so much. I think that, man, your story is just so beautiful, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and just being so vulnerable and willing to share. I think that you just never know what people are going through. You just never know, and it's requires a different level of bravery to come on here and to share your pain with the world. And I thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your testimony. I have this little gift for you. You're gonna love this. It's so cute. It's a little bracelet that has a little flower with a mustard seed in the middle. And so it's just a reminder to have faith. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, Julie.
Surf Clothing is one of our favorite brands. They have been supporting us since the very beginning. We love them so much. I think one of the things that I like about Surf so much is that my husband is literally obsessed, and I brought him in here to share his experience with Surf Clothing. So, Jesse, tell us.
I love Surf Clothing. This is the best shirt that I've ever owned for church and professional purposes. It's got four-way stretch, which makes it really nice because not all the time I'm at my desk. Oftentimes I'm moving and out and about. So it's really nice to have a flexible shirt that moves with me. I know that it's got a mesh collar that I love. I think the purpose of that is really to prevent stains, but it's also super comfortable. It's way more comfortable around my neck. You know, if I'm at church or in business meetings with a tie or whether I don't have a tie, it's really comfortable. It's got arm vents, which I love because I'm kind of a bigger fella. It helps me so that I can be a bit breathable, and I love it.
And also, you can get 15% off a shirt from Serve by using the code COMEBACK.
A lot of people have asked us how they can support the podcast, and we have created a Comeback Podcast merch line on our website, www.comebackpodcast.org. All of the money made from the merch goes right back into the podcast. So if you are interested in supporting the podcast and you want to purchase some merch, we would love it. Check it out. Thank you so much for being a supporter of the Comeback Podcast and listening to our episodes. It would mean so much to us if you would like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It helps other people be able to find us, and we want to share this message to everyone.